Did you know that the cowbell was voted as the worst percussion instrument of 2023 by Modern Drummer magazine? The Blue Oyster Cult banned the instrument from their concerts following the infamous skit on SNL with Will Ferrell. Chad Smith, Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer, loves the instrument, probably because he's tired of spice in his song. It's a lazy instrument, one a 2-year-old can play. It's incapable of being featured as a solo instrument, amongst other qualities not even worth mentioning. Critics maintain that it's not a serious instrument. Is Mississippi State a serious team? Can they put up a fight Saturday night at Kyle Field, blackout night? Let's talk about that and much more. Welcome to the Aggie Central podcast. I'm your host, Central. Thanks for joining me, especially you ringers of the cowbell. And I'm glad you're still here. I do love to poke fun at our opponents and have a few laughs. But enough of that. The fun is over. Let's look at what's happening this weekend. Just a quick word from our sponsors. You've heard of Roback, right? Activewear that craves activity. Fantastic. Because they don't sponsor this channel. Nah. What we got is something better. It's called Paddle Forward, discount athletic wear for guys who watch sports on the couch. Link in the description. On to Mississippi State. All right, who are they? That's the real question. Can they be defined by numbers or does it take more? The answer is yes. Yes. This is that time of year where you want to press into the numbers, but it's just not quite there. I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to figure out who the teams are and who they've played. It served us well this last week, kind of trying to figure out, well, A&M played Notre Dame. Who was Notre Dame? Auburn played Oklahoma. Who was Oklahoma? We did that. There's always kind of some catches in that. It seemed like it kind of did the trick in that what was going to play out played out. What was going to work well seemed to work well, even though the score kind of got a little wonky. You've got a game every so often where things are just not going to go the way you think they're going to go in some particular areas. This one for A&M was penalties. So I am going to start you off with some numbers, okay? I am going to start you off with some numbers. I do think they're important. So take these in. Mississippi State, 33rd in rushing offense. 75th in passing offense, 49th in total offense. That means pretty much nothing without knowing the context, which is the whole point of why I'm making these issues with, like, well, who did you play? What's that team about? What can they do? What's their context? You want to know about the rushing O? Well, consider what rushing Ds you are playing against, right? So here's the point. Consider who they've played. Now, Mississippi State beat Arizona State out of the gate and almost beat Tennessee this last weekend. So rewind it back. Look at those stats one more time. 33rd rushing offense. Now, Tennessee is the 38th best rushing defense. Arizona State is the 11th best rushing defense. Right. So that means more to me at this point. Okay, that's why I'm emphasizing this at this point. 33rd rushing offense, pretty good. I mean, I'm taking notice with that. If that was my team, I'm certainly thankful that it's not like 80 or worse, right? But we're all kind of thinking that we would love to have like a top 10 in any category. It just isn't always very likely. Top 20, top 25 is usually somewhat standard for a good quality team. 30s is still good. It's still good, especially when you consider the type of defense that they had been going up against. I think that the rushing offense is definitely a strength. I don't think there's any way around that. Moving on to the next, 75th best passing offense. That word doesn't really seem to go together. 75th best. You kind of want to, I mean, you're in the second half of the NCAA at this point, so probably not characterizing it as 75th best being the right way to do that. Consider who they've gone up against. Again, I'm going to emphasize Arizona State and Tennessee because these are the FBS. These are the teams you really want to know how they did against, right? Arizona State has the 98th best, worst, whatever you want to say, passing D. Okay, 103rd in passing D for Tennessee. So if Mississippi State's only 75th in passing offense, and they've played these struggling passing defenses, I just feel like I got to kind of downgrade that. I feel like if you're going to play those types of passing defenses, shouldn't you probably be doing better than that? Like if you had been playing anybody worth of note with passing defenses in the top 50, much less like around the 30 mark, your passing offense would probably have a much lower rating, like probably somewhere closer to 100, right? So that's a lot of context. It's a lot of context to take into account, and we'll move on quickly through these because there's a lot to take in here with who is Mississippi State. They are 49th in total offense. Arizona State, who they played, is 44th in total D. Tennessee is 81st. Kind of a middle of the pack road. Not much to take away from, say, all those numbers in any one particular direction. Okay, so let's look at more on who they've played. They've also played Alcorn State, Southern Miss, Northern Illinois, and like I said, they lost a close one to Tennessee. That's where we're going to kind of camp out a little bit more in here in just a second. Alcorn State, Mississippi, Southern Miss, and NIU. Those speak for themselves. No one's getting in a twist, pretty much one way or another, unless you're going to lose to one of those teams or even play them kind of close, right? So Arizona State. Now they were ranked 12th when Mississippi State beat them. So the question then becomes: do they get credit for beating a top 15 team? If Arizona State's 12, is that worth something? These preseason rankings kind of get out of hand. For you Aggies listening out there, right? Auburn came into the matchup against A&M this last week unranked after playing Oklahoma in a game that they pretty much got robbed, and they would have been 4-0 coming into Kyle Field. If they had been ranked like in the top 10 prior to facing Oklahoma, do you think they would have been ranked in the top 20 or at least top 25 coming into Kyle Field after losing that type of game to Oklahoma? I certainly think they would have. So these preseason rankings, can be a little bit skewed, and that's what the question is here: is Arizona State a legitimate 12, right? So who is Arizona State? Now, besides Mississippi State, having played Mississippi State in a couple of nobodies, Arizona State played and beat Baylor on a last-second field goal. Okay, it got a little bit extra context right there for you to consider. It took Baylor down to the wire, beat them on a last-second field goal. Okay, then basically did the same thing to TCU this last Saturday. To their credit, TCU is ranked 24th at the time. I haven't looked just yet. They probably dropped out of the top 25, right? But my thought would be Arizona State's probably right around a bubble top 25 team. So they probably weren't 12, but they're probably pretty close to a ranked team. So I think solidly inside the top 30. So I got to give them some credit for that win. That's a decent win. You're not playing another NIU when you played Arizona State, right? Now you didn't play Georgia or you didn't play in Ohio State when you played Arizona State. You just played a solid opponent, okay? So also for Mississippi State, like I said, they took Tennessee down to the wire and they got beaten overtime. Tennessee, number 15 team right now. Okay, how much credit are we going to give them for taking number 15 to overtime? That's the question. I mean, how that doing something like that makes them seem like they should be ranked somewhere around the 17, maybe 18 mark, right? So maybe they should be. So in this game, this one went back and forth. It was a lot of momentum swings. Sometimes that works out to being an excellent game. And maybe it was, but there was a lot of sloppiness going on in this game all along the way. Very sloppy game, in my opinion. There was 5 turnovers, 3 of those by Tennessee. There were a lot of short fields, missed field goals, pick sixes, and fumble recoveries, both of which those were done and benefited Tennessee. Mississippi State could have won this game. They didn't. All right. Saying they could have won this game is a little bit loaded. You see the things that aren't typical in games, like the turnovers, the pick sixes, the fumble recovery for touchdowns. Those are not typical plays. We have this tendency to want to take those out and say you don't get credit for those, and that's not usual. But as we're starting to find out, A&M people, there's something to teams that find a way to win and teams that seemingly find a way to lose. Which one do you think is which in this particular scenario? It does seem like Tennessee is the team that finds a way to win, and Mississippi State's the team that finds a way to lose. So Tennessee also generated 5 sacks, 11 TFLs in this game. Pretty notable stats, something similar to what we were looking at with when Auburn had faced OU the previous week to facing A&M. So again, similar to the line with regard to how Auburn was sacked, 9, 10 times versus OU, and then when we did basically half of that versus Auburn this last week. So right now, this is why I like to get into what the teams have done and the other teams that they have played. OU's defense is pretty well assured to be pretty elite. And we did about half of that. So we're somewhere south of the elite status, but probably up in the very good status. I think that would be safe to give us a decent grade, right? So if Tennessee's defense is elite, you can probably expect us to do about half of that. If they're elite, I'm not sure I'm ready to crown Tennessee's defense as elite. They definitely got some holes and some things that weren't solid all the way around. So I think we can do at least half of what they did. So let's see, what did I say that Tennessee did here? They did 5 sacks and 11 TFLs, right? So just figure A&M, can generalizing this, might be able to do 3 sacks, 5 TFLs. Okay, 3 sacks seems like a pretty good number. The tackles for loss might could balloon up just a little bit more. I think we have a pretty decent defense that's coming on. I'll make my case for that here in just a second. But just consider that as just a general baseline about what you might expect our defense to do to Mississippi State based off of what we saw us do to an Auburn team when after they faced an elite defense, and then what you're getting production from Mississippi State's opponents. Okay. All right. On to a few more stats real quick. All right. Mississippi State, they're 33rd in total defense. Again, means almost nothing without any context, right? So between Tennessee and Arizona State, here's what those teams are doing. Tennessee is 7th in total offense, and Arizona State is 51st in total offense. Okay, that Tennessee number seems to be pretty telling. Arizona State gives us a little bit, right? There's pretty wild variety in there. That's a lot of volatility. If those numbers were closer together, I'd give them a little bit more credit for being 33rd. Okay, what probably happened was they were doing quite well overall, Mississippi State, and then they ran into an offense and that dropped down significantly, right? So if they run into another offense, if our offense is good, like we think it is, and they run into that offense, you would expect Mississippi State's total defensive numbers to then drop again. It'll be interesting to track that number after this game to see, does that come down some more, okay? Because 33rd, like I was saying earlier about previous numbers, I kind of like the 33rd number, but it also depends on which way it's been moving. If it's moving lower based off of you playing higher quality opponents, especially in those particular areas as of recent, that tells me quite a bit more about the story. Okay, and so I'm under the suspicion that this is kind of moving down because Arizona State was played earlier, Tennessee was played most recently. So my thought is this is moving lower and lower. Maybe not by a whole lot, but this could be maybe say in the 40s after this, and now we're starting to get a better idea of what Mississippi State's defense is really shaping up to look like, right? So moving on, they are 63rd in rush defense. Taking into consideration who they played, Arizona State, 23rd in rush offense, Tennessee's 39th. Decent numbers by their opponents. 63rd still not probably the quality number you'd be wanting to see out of an SEC defense, to be quite honest. You want them to be pretty strong in rush D. I wouldn't call 63rd. You're like right at 50 percentile for NCAA in rush defense. Probably needs to be better. Pass D, however, is 27th for Mississippi State. Now, Tennessee is the sixth best passing offense, and Arizona State's 53rd. Similar to kind of the situation beforehand. I think Mississippi State's passing defense pretty decent through like 4 games. And then you play Tennessee, you get hammered a little bit, drops down. Maybe not a whole lot. I think they're probably in better solid ground than what we were looking at for um, Mississippi State in total defense. Okay, that's just a general feeling about what it is A&M is going to have to deal with in this regard when going against Mississippi State and the opponents that they've played. Right. So to give you a good feel for those numbers versus what A&M is currently doing, I think these will be pretty telling. A&M, 23rd in total offense, 23rd in passing offense, and 61st in rushing. Now, remember, I made a big deal about who you've played. There's a decent argument that Auburn is a decent team. I'm not going to say good team. They have some very specific problems, but they are good in some very specific ways. When it comes to their defense, I would give them a pretty solid defensive grade. So if I'm talking about A&M's offense, I think these numbers would be pretty solid. And 23rd in total offense, 23rd in passing offense, those are up there. Also considering we played a highly ranked Notre Dame team. Okay, so we played some quality opponents through 4 games. Not many have done that, and I think that gives us some weight to our numbers and strengthens those that probably have staying power. Okay, now we're 61st in rushing offense, and I've got maybe a little bit more to add to that, but maybe even more so on the defensive side of things is going to be, say, a little bit more telling. But there's some of the story kind of goes the same way for rushing offense versus rushing defense, right? I mean, we were trying to establish Marcel Reed early on as a passer. We needed to do that. We weren't focused on the running game. We only really became focused on it, I would probably say, this last game. I mean, look at what the numbers were. I mean, I don't have them off the top of my head, honestly, but we know what they were against UTSA. I think we were under 100. We definitely didn't have a 100-yard rusher in any game. And then finally, Le'Veon Moss goes for a $139 versus Auburn. But that was a very concerted effort to run the ball. So it makes sense. Sure, it's 61st best rushing offense, right? Best. It's like middle of the pack by the number. But if you took that number that we just put up in this last ball game and compared that to teams, you'd probably have a top 10 rushing offense. 139 yards in game, at least top 20. Now, it's not fair to do that right here, right now, but I'm just kind of giving you more generalized ideas about, like, yeah, well, what's going to happen if we give that same type of game plan and effort coming up? If we're going to run the ball, towards Mississippi State, and we're going to feed Le'Veon Moss, yeah, he's probably going to have a better game than he did against UTSA, Utah State. Right? Right. All right, flipping the script. 35th in total defense for your Aggies, 49th in passing defense, 42nd in rush defense. Not numbers that jump off the charts for you, but they're solid. They're pretty close together. You're not seeing something that's like wildly off, right? Not like what you were seeing with Mississippi State. The volatility is not there. This is a more consistent team based off of these numbers. That's exactly why I pulled these off in there. And let me make an even stronger case for you real quick. Since 200 plus rushing yards were given up to UTSA, A&M has given up 78 yards total to Utah State, 136 to Notre Dame, and the stingy 52 yards versus Auburn this last week. Okay? That's an average of 2.8 yards per carry and 91 yards per game. Okay? That's a dramatically increased game. That would make A&M's rush defense a top 20 defense, rushing defense currently by total yards allowed, and 18th if you go by yards per carry. Okay, so Choose your stat on that one, either yards per carry. I'm taking out UTSA. If I just took out UTSA from the stat chart and went off the last 3 games, then that, and you plug those numbers and only use numbers versus the rest of the NCAA, that's where A&M would be ranked. You'd have a top 20 rushing offense. Now, we can say that taking UTSA out of there, that's not fair. I get it. That's like, trying to look for a moral victory or something like that. But now I'm going to flip it, because that's not actually what my point is. My point is not that, well, if you just take that out, that's what this defense is. No, my point is that after the UTSA game, the team started playing differently. So whenever you're thinking about a team's identity, um, you can look at that number and be like, well, sure, they're the 61st, best rushing defense in the country. Okay, well, that is considering the whole body of work, sure. But these things sometimes need to be taken with trends. In the last 3 games, they've been a top 20 defense, rushing defense. Okay. I think something's changed in the team, and that's why I emphasize this. So I'm going to put this up as a strength, not so much as a negative for this team. And I'll leave it up to you to decide whether or not you think that that's a legitimate take on this particular team, right? Right. So, with that said, just want to take quick note. I've got another segment coming out later this week. I think I'm going to call it Around the SEC. The point of the segment is going to be to look and see how the other teams did and generalize those, kind of make a new prediction for A&M based off of what we currently know about those teams. I think it helps to look around, see teams what LSU, Arkansas, Florida, and everybody else, and update you kind of holistic big picture about how that affects A&M on the outlook. We're looking for 9-3 and plus potential playoff consideration, and this matters. That kind of conversation matters. So back to the conversation. I think this is a different team from a rushing defensive standpoint since they played UTSA. Okay, I think that's important. Mississippi State is a running team. They average 42 carries per game. They run the ball over 61% of the time. So now you're seeing, this is why I've emphasized this so much. It's their strength, and they know it's their strength. Okay? They had 186 yards versus Southern Miss, 282 versus Alcorn, 292 versus Northern Illinois, and 198 versus Tennessee. Okay? So you see where I went with this. Our rush defense is going to play a big role in this game. Which rush defense are we? Are we the one that takes into account UTSA as part of that? Or are we the rush defense that put up that held Auburn to 52? Okay? We'll see. We will see. So with all that said, there's a big but in here. Big but. Big but. Mississippi State. They are 104th in sacks allowed, 91st in tackles for loss allowed, 134th in penalties. You thought A&M couldn't get worse in penalties. Well, that was really just one game. Mississippi State, not good in penalties. One redeeming factor, they are 14th in turnover margin. This last game, there's 5 turnovers. Tennessee had 3. Mississippi State had 2. So Mississippi State's +1 in the turnover margin. That's what, in large part, has them up so high. Anything somewhere around the +1 mark is usually highly regarded. So my thought is this. First, Tennessee came in unfocused. That's how I see it. They lost to Georgia 2 weeks prior and then walked through UAB. They were up and down in this game. I don't think Mississippi State got the best Tennessee. I don't. That's what I'm seeing whenever I watch the game. There's turnovers, missed tackles, undisciplined play. All of this, in my mind, supports this take. So they hung around with a top 15 team, but they didn't. Again, the question a whole time here is, they've got this number 15 ranking, but did they play this game like the number 15 team? I made this point in my reaction to Auburn about who Auburn was this last weekend when we beat them. And I'm going to back up for a moment and go all the way back to Notre Dame for a second. Okay. Notre Dame goes on the road, I think after that, or plays Purdue. They've had, I don't know, two wins since. I'm not sure exactly what their record is. The question became, when we played, no, so Notre Dame went out and spanked Arkansas. That's right. That's what happened this last week. My Lord, how did I almost forget about that? Notre Dame goes out and spanks Arkansas. The question was posed to me, if they lose to Arkansas, does that take the shine off of the win of A&M beating Notre Dame? My answer to this was yes, it takes off the shine. But whenever I said that, what I'm thinking in my head, what I mean is, yeah, well, it's going to take off the shine for the national media pundits. They're going to say, well, Notre Dame lost. They're not as good as they once were. Not as good as they once were. The question there is what type of team played A&M when they played A&M in Notre Dame? What Notre Dame team played? My thought is that Notre Dame gave us a top 10 shot when we played them. That's what I think. You look at that game, you look how they played, and that's the team that I think you got. Maybe I'm looking at that through maroon colored sunglasses. I don't think that. I think I'm giving you a very even and solid take on the performance of that team. I think I've given you a very even and solid take on how Tennessee performed against Mississippi State. Mississippi Staters, you don't have to like it. You can say, man, look, we took that team down to the wire and look, we did that. And you can be proud of that. And I think there is something to that, to be quite honest, right? But that's my take. So I don't see them hanging around for 4 quarters. Our weaknesses and strengths, they match up well with theirs. The last game seemed to be Tennessee's struggle win, honestly. So yes, of course, take that for context about who, or rather what team Mississippi State played so closely, but also to say, A&M is bound to have a struggle bus type of win at some point. Auburn certainly looks like that could have been that game, but really, we played well. We just didn't put everything together. I think that's the best description of this game. We played well, we just didn't put everything together. And we didn't put enough of it together to not make it look like it wasn't a struggle win. Those penalties just made that game look really bad. But if you look at the box score, it was domination. And that's why I titled the reaction video what I did. We dominated Auburn. We absolutely did. Penalties dominated us. We got to get rid of that, right? So my emphasis here is that the effort was there, no doubt. No doubt the effort was there from us. Will Elko's team have a game where this effort isn't there? That's a big question about Elko and what kind of coach he is. Is he going to have a team where the effort's just not there? I don't think I ever even really saw that out of Jimbo. I don't really think I've seen it much out of any A&M team. I mean, I've seen them lose, but I can't recall any time I've seen them quit. Right? That's the mantra. So will Elko's team, ever have this type of game? I don't know. It's hard to say right now. Or more than one aspect maybe just doesn't come together for Elko's team. Something like that. Penalties plus turnovers, that could be a deadly combination. Last game, it was clearly with penalties. If this game we come out and things are just not clicking, we have some turnovers, which Mississippi State's good at getting, that could reshape a game. Maybe they have the strong special teams play. Maybe ours, where they've not really been their force as of recent, punting, I don't think has been great. Or no returns to note from punting or kickoff. Maybe they get one. Maybe they get a pick six. Maybe they get a fumble recovery somehow. I mean, we looked at the blocked punt against Notre Dame. That could happen, and it could shape the game. Usually the team has one of these in a season, and we're approaching that time of year where this is probably the time when a team will start to do that. I don't think that that is this game, y'all. I don't. I think this is the game where it all comes together for A&M. That's just my just my kind of feeling on this. Elko said in the presser today that I think he was what he was commenting on was in reference to the penalties, and the way they decided they were going to fix this was that when the players made had an infraction, they had to contribute to the coaches Cabo fund. I just think that's a fantastic way, with these guys making as much money as they are, sending the coaches to Cabo. That'd be fantastic. So for you Mississippi State folks, you got a good team. Remember, this was supposed to be a rebuild. Jeff Lebby was supposed to be rebuilding this entire team. That's what I said to my viewers early on in the season, because with that type of rebuild, you expect that to be pretty much a gimme win. The going story was that last year was year zero for Jeff Lebby, and this year is going to be another year zero because he's having to basically just replace the entire team. Well, he's done a pretty good job, and you might have you one in this guy right now. I don't think this is your game. Shapen is good. Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans, I like them both. I mean, they're excellent pass catchers, both top 10 and SEC guys at the moment. We got two ourselves. Don't forget that, though. Bothwell, a top 5 rock toter. There's a lot to like in Will Whitson, what he brings to the defensive line, Brumfield, Manning, a lot of great additions to the back of the defense as well. You have some pieces there, Mississippi State. So I don't want to sell you short. This is probably not the team I think is out there. What I've thought the type of team that it would take to beat A&M this year was a team like Auburn, who had some high-end elite pass catchers, a Lenora Sellers type situation, or even like an out-of-body experience Taylor Green type of situation. I am wondering though, if I jumped and came up with that a little bit too prematurely, and maybe just a solid effort from a bunch of role players is what it would take to beat A&M. Just play your game, play solid, make good play calls, make good reactions, be well prepared, and maybe catch A&M on a day when we're just not quite firing on all cylinders. That might be something that I've been blind to. So I felt the need to, and compelled to put that out there, because Mississippi State, the way they have been playing has been impressive. Because of where they were expected to be versus where they are currently. So I do think it's a team to watch out for. I'm still going to stick by where I'm at with this, and I don't think that it's going to be, uh, you know, a win. I think we've got so many weapons. Craver, KC got his first 100-yard game. Le'Veon Moss just threw one down. And we still have yet to get Marcel Reed out of the pocket and start really, really utilizing his legs. And we might be waiting to unleash that at a certain time when we need that. But with the defense coming along, Des Ricks, Will Lee both playing excellent at the corner position. Linebackers just had their best game of the year. And I would argue defensive line has been probably the biggest, I don't know if you call it surprise exactly, but they are low-key playing. They were supposed to be the weakness of the defense. I'm not going to sit here and call them the strength. I just don't think they're the weakness we thought that they were going to be. Fair enough. So I think Mississippi State is actually going to come into this game with a ton of confidence. After playing Tennessee the way they played, I don't think they come in down off this game. So I don't think they're going to be in letdown mode. I don't. I think it's going to serve them well, especially early. I just think we're going to go and smash their cowbell. That's it. That's my take. What's that amount to score wise? I'm going to put this one down for 35-20 A&M. 35-20 A&M wins. That's my prediction. We will come back. We will give you a reaction. Look out for the Around the SEC segment later this week. Thanks for joining me. Thanks and gig 'em.